This video is sponsored by Wing Technology, your ultimate flight sim hardware solution.
Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing very well. I'm super duper excited because we've got the mighty Ate online today, which was great. We could finally afford him. Joking. Ate, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks.
That's beautiful. I love that smile. That smile is so cool. Right. And Ate, I'm sure you know who he is. If you don't, I'll go through his bio in a second. Really nice guy. And that's what it makes it cool for me. So, Ate is a former athlete and fighter pilot turned keynote speaker, consultant and airline pilot, flying fighter aircraft from aircraft carriers in the French Navy for over a decade. And he had what you might call an intense career. After graduation as an exchange officer from the US Navy, aviator curriculum, he went back to France. Got a picture of Ate in the cockpit there. He is the only Canadian citizen that flew on the Rafale Navy and Super Attendant. He flew a day and night combat operations in Iraq, displayed in air shows in Europe in front of 110,000 people. I may have even seen you myself, I don't know. And instructed the new generation on the Dassault Rafale. Is that right? Rafale?
That's correct.
Close as I can get. With over 2,500 hours of flight time and 200 carrier landings, he flew numerous combat missions providing support to troops, including Canadians, on the ground. During his career, he faced emergencies, had to take life or death decisions, and led young pilots into combat. He got the Cross for Military Valor for his actions in combat. For his last flight in the service, he flew over the Vimy Memorial. Now a pilot for Air Canada, Ate shares and adapts the methods he used to survive in fast jets with the corporate world as a keynote speaker, coach and consultant. He spoke at TEDx Toulouse in 2019. In 2019 he spoke in Europe for companies like Nespresso, Bradesco, Safran, American Express, British and French business schools. He uses virtual reality flight simulators in some of his high executive workshops, enabling them to get out of their comfort zone and learn a lot about themselves. That's true. Being shot down by MiGs really puts you out of your comfort zone, isn't it? Leadership and communication is just a couple of hours. His first business book debrief out summer 2019. Obviously, this is slightly out of date. Former triathlon, duathlon and precision flying French national team competitor. He also holds a strong expertise in mental preparation, communication and stress management. And Ate raced in 3 world championships: precision flying, long distance triathlon, short distance duathlon, and won the US Open triathlon in 2000. You know what, Ate, the one thing that I hate about doing these interviews, and I always say this, is how ridiculous it makes me look. Just like a kind of generic computer nerd with no useful attributes at all. Interviewing guys who've like conquered the world and climbed Everest. It drives me nuts. But anyway, that's all very good. Ate, as you know, what we do is we open it up to the valued viewers who I'm sure are fans of you as well. Literally, so many people have asked me to go and check you out. It was actually, I think it was you that came to me, but I've been, meaning to contact you for ages. And the valued viewers want to ask questions. So here they go. Disclaimer. Sometimes they can be stupid questions because I don't edit them. People will ask what they want. If you get offended, I apologize. It's just one of those things. Anything you want to say or whatever before we start kicking off with some questions?
I'll stick in the plane. I won't eject.
There we go. We'll try. Right, absolutely. I'm aware that you're forever busy because of who you are, and we'll try and keep it as brief as possible. So, first, have you ever fought against an enemy fighter jet? Now, I don't know what he's actually saying there. Does he mean live combat? Does he mean an enemy in training? You have to interpret the question and answer it however you interpret it, I guess.
Sure. In training, yes. I flew against AV-8s. I flew against F-18s. I flew against Typhoons, British Typhoons, German Typhoons, Spanish Typhoons, lots of different type of jets, but in training only. French military hasn't fought dogfights, stuff like that for decades, so I didn't get that chance, but we prepare for it quite a lot. So it's actually one of the best training you can get, and one of the most enjoyable training is doing BVR to the merge kind of training. So did quite a lot, but in training only, which is not that bad.
Roger. Now, without trying to get political or nationalistic or whatever, what would you say is the most difficult of those fighters that you've trained against? I know it's all about the pilot rather than the machine, but if you had to, really respect a plane to fight against, what would be yours?
I respect all planes. Typhoon, high altitude BVR is very dangerous. Depend on the country. British are pretty good with them. Germans less. Sorry, Germans. Really depends. One of the scariest aircraft I dogfight was when I was flying Super E and the Aviate. I actually did a video on it with my HUD footage because you really see it like moving like this in the air. It was an Italian Harrier. It's pretty impressive. But it always depends on the aircraft you're flying it. But as a Super E pilot, the Harrier was quite a surprise, a great surprise, very agile aircraft.
Roger. What nationality was that Harrier, out of interest?
It was Italian Navy.
Right, how interesting. Okay, thank you very much for that. The next question, this one comes down to kind of nationality. What's your advice for non-Canadians in Canada to join the Royal Canadian Air Force? Also, if you want, are there any contacts that you can give out or whatever?
Yeah, so the Royal Canadian Air Force does recruit foreigners as pilot as well. Just like most of the Commonwealth countries, they tend to look for a specialist with a known experience from an allied country. So let's say you're French, you're British, you're Australian, you were a pilot for your military, and now you move to Canada. There is a way. You just show up at the recruiting center and you tell them, and there is a specific recruitment cycle for that. I know for several French nationals that join the Royal Canadian Air Force through that scheme, and it gets you the nationality quicker as well. So just show up to the recruiting center, and the best advice is to have a unique, very specific and recognized experience as an expert in something specific that interests the military, like IT expert, fighter pilot, stuff like that.
Roger, thank you very much. Next, we're bouncing into the future. With technological breakthroughs, do you think 6th gen fighters, or whatever, will eventually be pilot-less?
I think we're heading toward a mixed fleets with fighter jets that are going to act as remote control center flown by a pilot, or I would even maybe put 2 pilots in them, 1 pilot, 1 NFO, and then leading in combat areas, drones. I think that's where we're going to go toward, because that makes sense.
So you'd have a human. So you'd have a human in a Rafale or whatever, and then he would have a flight of AI guys that can go off, do that, go off, do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
I think that's where we're heading. Yes.
Roger. Okay. Well, let's see that. I like guys. Well, not guys. I like people in my fighter jet. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it depends on the mission. If you have to get rid of suppression of enemy air defense, and you can send UAVs, why wouldn't you send UAVs to do that part? But at the same time, if you look at what is happening in Eastern Europe right now, with the conflict, they're using a lot of small drones. And I think it is underrated, small drones, and major militaries missed a little bit. Western militaries missed a little bit the turn there, and there is so much we can do and improve in terms of small UAVs. I think it's really going to transform the air combat warfare, because you can destroy surface-to-air missiles sites with very small drones, and I think that's something that's gonna be a big game changer in the next 10 years.
Roger, absolutely. Now, one thing, just while I remember, when people have linked your videos to me and I've watched, you were speaking English, then lately, and I've just been watching, but then I went and watched your actual channel and it's all in French. Am I missing something? Do you have a separate English channel?
Yeah, I actually have, I post most of my content in the 2 languages. If you look at my playlist, I've got playlist in English, playlist in France. Some of my stuff are only in French, but also about 40% of the channel is in English as well. So sometimes you have the same video in French and in English. So if you go on my channel, what you should do as an English speaker is look at the playlist and look for the English playlist. So debrief in English, short debrief in English, and look for English titles as well. Sometimes I even put the flag. But my channel is bilingual. I put content usually in both. So I do everything twice, which is sort of painful.
Yes, absolutely fine. Right. Well, yeah, so do I. Usually I do it first, get it wrong, and then go and then go do it again. So, right. Next. Now you'll have to help me with this one because I don't get it. Does really HMDS-like systems drifting out over time? How do you deal with it? In case it's true, can INS degrade over time in like modern planes like the Rafale? HMDS, what does he mean? Do you any idea?
I think he means a helmet-mounted display system. I think he means all the stuff in the helmet. Maybe you heard about the F-35 incident, where a guy had an issue with his helmet and it led to an ejection a couple months ago. I think that's where he's getting at. Yes, INS does move if you do not have automatic updates. Nowadays, we have automatic updates with GPS, military GPS, so you don't have any movement. But when you look at jets back in the days, and I flew vintage birds, you could have up to 3 miles an hour of INS movement. You could have it if you don't have, I mean, for that generation, yeah, you can usually have, it's usually 1 to 3 miles, but when you're based on a boat, it's more, so about 3 miles-ish. That's the max you'll get. But nowadays, with Rafale or that generation of aircraft, you're going to have automatic updates with GPS or other systems inside I can discuss. As aircraft like the Rafale are supposed and designed to be able to conduct nuclear strikes, so they're supposed to be able to do low level in the mountains autonomously, so they have specific systems to be able to have a very good inertial system even without GPS. So nowadays it's not an issue anymore, but lots of technology involved.
Roger. And that brings me on to this little argument I've been having with a guy. And the argument goes something like this. Nowadays, it looks like a lot of these modern jets, Rafale, F-18, F-16, whatever, is really reliant on automatic GPS updates. I think you call it EGI. I don't know what it means, but for exactly the reason it keeps your INS systems up to date. But surely, in a real war, the first thing you're going to do is jam/block the hostiles, GLONASS or sat-nav, you know what I mean, satellites. And so would a modern fighter, do you reckon, be really seriously damaged in its effectiveness, losing its EGI? Any ideas, or not allowed to say?
What I would say is I would present the matter in a different way, something more strategic. What is the highest level of aggression a major country could do to another country without risking a nuclear retaliation, in your opinion?
Hardly anything. I wouldn't dare do anything.
Imagine, you've seen the movie Gravity?
Yes, I have.
How does the movie Gravity start? Do you remember why there are those debris all around the planet?
Oh, I guess one banged into the other, but I can't remember why.
If I remember correctly, the Indian did a test of attrition of a satellite. They tested a missile to destroy a satellite, and the resulting debris startles the entire scenario. But where I'm getting at is nowadays you've got several countries that are able to destroy satellites. So how would, let's say, take an example, the US react if tomorrow morning we wake up and a country decided to take down all the GPS satellites? Nobody would agree for the US to retaliate with nuclear fire on the country's territory, killing millions. It just doesn't make sense. Yet, what percentage of the US military would be impacted by the loss of those satellites? It's going to be huge, because all the GPS guided bombs, all that stuff, you can ditch them. So what I invite you to do is think about the impact of losing GPS coverage with modern jets, and how much it can impact the weapon load of the ordnance you can take. So you can ditch all the GPS-guided bombs and stuff like that. So it is huge. So it's an issue that is known now. So you have to bear in mind that we have to be able to conduct strikes without GPS. Yet, in the past 20 years, we went extremely GPS dependent. And now, if you Google it, you'll see they're putting fundings into trying to find something around that. Because, hey, it's how the military work. Like, initially, people were fighting on the ground, and then we started flying slightly above, and then we were doing reconnaissance even higher, and then we had the E2. They got shut down, so we had the SR-71, too fast to get shut down, but then we got satellites, nobody could touch us, and now, oh, we can touch satellites, so we have to reinvent ourselves, and we're at that turning point. Satellites aren't safe anymore, so we have to reinvent all the supply chain, so to speak.
Wow, you've really thought about this, haven't you? That's interesting. Right, well, that's a great answer. I've got to go back.
My job.
Yes, right. Fair play, fair play. Right, let's bosh on. Are night flights in jets scary? A lot? Question mark. Or can you see as much as in the day with a FLIR or helmet-mounted, goggles or whatever?
Day flights can be scary too, but depending on the duration of the aircraft. Landing on a boat with a Super E was scary, wasn't fun. We had no FLIR, no stuff like that, and as a young pilot, weren't allowed to have NVGs, so it was really difficult. I had buddies trying to reform on stars.
Wow.
So it's actually, you think it's another aircraft because sometimes stars blink a bit. So the guys try to reform on stars, but hey, not going to work. So that happened several times. It can be scary. As far as the FLIR stuff goes, I never flown with the FLIR in front of me. I've flown with NVGs, been to combat with NVGs. What I could say is that sometimes flying at night gives you a tactical advantage. And one of the reasons is because flying with NVGs at night, you can use your FLIR in a different way, and you can mark position using your laser tracking device in a more easy ways than what you can do daytime. But landing on a boat at night is always difficult, and you tend to be more fatigued as well at night, which adds to the overall feelings that it is more difficult.
Roger. I'm sure we'll come on to DCS in a bit, but at least in DCS, and again, I'm just a silly little computer nerd, but even I get, and in the game, completely terrified at night and lose my situational awareness all the time because of those lovely, the big cues of the equator are no longer there. If not the equator, the horizon is gone. I find it incredibly worrying.
So usually what happens is daytime you will have small cues, and you will tend to realize that a situation is moving in the bad direction sooner. At night, you don't really tend to realize it, and all of a sudden you have this abrupt change, so you get surprised quite a lot. Especially in closure speed, it can be very tricky, so that's more difficult. And just a quick example for those of you that run, and I know now, the sun comes down pretty early. If you go running trails at night, within COVID limits and all those regulations, but if you go running at night, you tend to underestimate the distance you run. And the reason is when you run during daytime, your brain takes in a lot of sceneries, information, data, and when you run at night, you have less data coming toward your brain, so you tend to underestimate the distance you did. And as military personnel or night runner, you get trained usually to be aware that, hey, be careful, if you move during the night, you might move much more than you expected. And it's basically the same principle. All this data missing is information you're missing. So all the stuff you're used to, your brain doesn't cope with it the same way. So next time you go running at night, you'll think about it.
I don't do a vast amount of running at night, but if I do, I'm going to double check. Right, very good, thank you. If you had to choose, I guess, one thing, what is the best way to train a pilot in air warfare skills?
Experience. You have to train. You have to get it. So initially, you have to be good in aerobatics, and then you have to work on your on being very disciplined, because the way you're going to use your radar, all that stuff, has to be very, very tight. So first, a lot of sheer flying initially, and then put him through as much situation as you can. Nothing beats experience. And now with flight simulators, you can really go far in the tactical world, but you still have to put your boots, your helmet in the aircraft and do it with G-load, fatigue, all that stuff. So at least 180 hours a year is really what you want to strive for. 220 if you do night missions as well. You have to get some.
Roger. You've picked up there on simulators that we can use. Obviously, that's right down my alley. If you had to pick up a very quick percentage, how far do you think you could train a real combat pilot in a just a make-believe scenario? How far, in terms of percentages, to be ready to go and fight, could you train him just in the simulator? And how much of that percentage does he actually need to be in the real plane doing what you said?
That's a very difficult question, and the limit is being moved by testing with a new training curriculum, pilot training next in the US, and the British have joined as well, where they go through VR training and they have AI adapting. They look at where their eyes look to adapt their training, and they manage to, I think, cut down about 50% of the time in the aircraft. I like that idea. I think you can actually. I think what you should do is not exactly what is being done right now. You should mix it in a smarter way. They tend to put pilots in the sim too early now. And I've visited and tried the PC-21 French Air Force Training Center a couple of weeks ago. And what I would do some training initially in the sim. Then you put people in the aircraft. They fly a lot, but they work on the basics. And once they're very proficient with the basics and they had to deal with some emergencies, then you put them back in the sim and you do a mix of 50-50. And once they're very proficient with the basics, once they're very proficient in the tactics they're supposed to do, now you can use the sim to go above and beyond on the tactical side, because you can't be as realistic as in a sim in the real jet, if that makes sense. You can't see a missile coming at you. You can't eject. You can't work on somebody that just ejected in real life and see his parachute going down. You can't sometimes have the helicopters coming in. So it actually, tactical-wise, you can go further in the sim. But as a pilot, you have to be able to go back to the basics and the basic skill. And what I'm afraid of is that we put too much emphasis on the tactics because the aircraft almost flies themselves now, and that we do the same mistakes that we did in the commercial world, and that led to crash like Rio Paris, stuff like that, where the guy they knew how to press the button, but they lost all that back to basic sense. Yeah. And because of those modern jets that are only very rarely facing issues, like on the Rafale, I never had any engine issue on the Rafale, ever. 800 hours, 0 engine issue on the Rafale. Super Étendard, I had 1 emergency a month.
Wow.
So I had to deal with almost 25 emergencies during my career, but most of them were flying Super E. On the Rafale was maybe Proxias, a couple stuff, but less. And where I'm getting at is you create your experience with those unique situations. And the more reliable your machines are, the less trained you are. And it's an issue in the commercial world. It is going to become an issue, I think, in the next 10 years in the fighter world as well. And if you look at the incidents that occurred this year, the F-35, the F-16 at Luke, a couple Air Force stuff as well, you see that it is slowly coming to a lack of basic training and basic skills in the military as well. So that's something to watch out for.
Really interesting, yeah.
You got to be very careful.
Yeah, so it's an amazing can of worms you just opened there, but I don't think we haven't got time to push on it now, but that's really interesting. That really is. I never thought about that. I'm aware of the commercial side, but I never thought about it in military. I always thought they would always be fully grassroots. I never thought they would ever have that problem, but...
I did a movie review. I did an accident review on the F-16 that crashed at Luke, and you see the poor pilot who was sent on a night, first SIN mission ever, 4th ship, nighttime, and he had to do air-to-air refueling for the first time ever. Just absolutely doesn't make sense. Yet, I've seen it before. I have a buddy, he did his first night air-to-air refueling during a combat mission. Just doesn't make sense at all. He had daytime refueling experience, but not nighttime. And he did it during a combat mission. So where I'm getting toward is we have omni-role aircraft. We have more and more ticks, boxes to tick, just like the commercial world 20 years ago. And we're slowly going toward that dangerous hill that is we need to tick all the boxes and we forget about the basics. One new mission after the next one. So we really have to be careful about that. Because when the Rafale starts working correctly, it's like what we call the cliff effect, and it really relies on your experience and your ability to deal with the unexpected.
Very interesting. Okay. Right, well, let's segue onto something new. We're going into suppression of enemy air defences, anti-SAM. I've always found it interesting how advanced European air forces such as RAF, ADA, MA do not operate anti-radiation missiles like the harm or the alarm, with the exception of Germany and Spain. In your opinion, can the Rafale successfully carry out SEAD operations against long-range area denial SAMs with just the Spectra ELINT system in conjunction with contemporary guided bombs? Or are SEAD operations against such large systems no longer as important?
That's a very good question. It's a strategical call. France decided to put more emphasis on the jammer and on the Spectra system. And right now with the Rafale, you could do SID, especially with the SBU. We rely on our electronic warfare to be able to enter the bubble. So it is possible. We used to have missiles to do that, called the Martel. The Martel was able to do SEAD, and we changed that, and yes, we went more into the jammer world. People tend to underestimate what jammers can do nowadays, and because it's so secure in terms of information, it is so secret, it is unlikely to be able to really recreate it to its full extent in softwares like DCS, or it is impossible to find open sources on that. But just look at the Growler, and you see there is an entire aircraft that is just huge, full of system, and those stuff are just amazing. The Spectra as well. So there is a lot of stuff going on with electronic warfare that we can't really discuss, but it is efficient.
Roger. I mean, that's the same. That's the weird, annoying thing about it. Me, the layman, aren't allowed to know anything about it. In our simulator, which is, you know, as close as we get, is white noise. All it is white noise, and that's all they can do. So
if it can help understand the nature of it, like I used to have hair before I joined the military, and with all those radio radars and missions, they're falling apart.
Yes, nice bit of radiotherapy for you, right? Lovely. Okay, right. We're bouncing. Well, following the 1991 Gulf War, the ADA decided to invert the original composition of Rafales from 1/3 two-seaters to 2/3 two-seaters as air-to-ground became more of a strategic goal. As far as I know, the French Navy did not follow. Do you agree with this decision, or do you believe that there is a benefit in operating two-seat platforms for air-to-ground?
The reason I was explained, the reason I was told we maintain single seat is due to the lack of space on the boat. That would have meant that we needed extra room for the NFOs, all that stuff, and it's a small ship, so would have been an issue. Another reason is, in the Navy, we thought we can do everything on our own, and we do it. Yet, sometimes, yes, life is easier with a two-seater. Happened to me once in combat. I wished I had somebody else with me to help me write down all the coordinates, all that stuff. Once. But joke aside, I think that with two-seaters, we could be less selective in the curriculum of the pilots, so maybe could have reduced the pilot shortage a bit. Honestly, I finished as one of the head instructor, and we had to stop some pilots sometime, and some of them left and went on to fly two-seaters in the Air Force. What I mean with that is that, of course, when you're single seat, naval base, your standard is here. If you had to be two-seater, maybe you could have a pilot that is here, because less workload for one guy. It just makes sense. So it's a choice. It makes your life tougher as a single seat guy doing all those naval missions, but it's still possible. Well, I think that it's more on the Air Force. I would have probably decided the same, because it's just easier. And at some point, we had so many different types of aircraft, so many different missions. Asking one guy to be proficient in all those missions is extremely selective and difficult. And you don't want to rely on just a couple guys to be able to defend your entire group. So I like single seats, but it is difficult to be good as a single seat pilot, and it is very selective. But we hadn't enough space on the boat anyway.
Roger, very good answer. I've got to say as well, these questions are really good, and there's so much. I'm so glad I didn't write these questions myself. They would have been bloody terrible. So, well done, guys. Right, another big complex one. I understand the Rafale incorporates a high degree of sensor fusion and uses the full extent of the Link 16 data link network, which allows for the broadcast of targeted information for ground and air targets, as well as general positioning. As this seems to be one of the main advantages of, for instance, the F-35, do you think that the Rafale/Eurofighter are sufficiently future-proof such that France and Germany will not need to be operating Generation 5 aircraft for the foreseeable future? And my question comes as Germany recently announced their entire fleet of Tornado IDS GO4 will be replaced with the EA-18 Growlers and more Eurofighters, and not the F-35 like we've done in the UK. Any thoughts?
I think I need a pill. My brain is melting.
It's big. It's big. Yep. Yep.
Yes. So to sum it up, the question is basically with the fifth generation aircraft are like Rafale and Typhoon. You don't really need an F-35. That's pretty much the idea, if I get it correctly.
Yep.
Yes and no. Yes and no. What I want people to understand, I'm not defending or accusing the F-35 here, but just look at the timeline. Rafale, first flight in '86, that's the year I was born. Operational in 2000 plus, but barely operational, and really, really operational around 2014 when he started being able to do all type of missions. That's when we started selling them. So we're talking about 30 years. It took them 30 years to really be able to deliver all type of missions. How old is the F-35? The F-35 first flight, let me check, was first production F-35 was 2011. What I mean with that is they really started the program. First one rolled out in 2016, so we're like, hey, we're 14 years. So what I mean with that is that the F-35, in my opinion, is like a teenager. It's like a teenager, and people don't really. I didn't look good when I was a teenager. Not looking much better now, but you know, you have all those acne spots. You're not very muscular. You're not in your best shape, and we're asking a 14-year-old athlete to fight against 25, 30 years old athletes at the same contest. So what's going to happen is, yes, maybe right now the F-35 is facing a lot of issues, is having a lot of troubles, but he's only 14 years old. Give him another 10 years. And in 10 years, with AI systems plugged into him, where you're going to press maybe a button and he's going to win the dogfight for you, stuff like that, it is going to be another world. So what I don't like is people judging the F-35 on what it is right now, because in terms of timeline, is only beginning. And just like any exponential curves, like this, good size, it takes some time to start, and then it's going to be a platform where they're going to be able to do a lot of upgrades in terms of AI, stuff like that, and then it's going to, oh my God, the F-35 is pretty cool. It can fly with a lot of UAVs and do a lot of crazy stuff that might be more difficult on a Typhoon or a Rafale, because initially it was designed, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So not with the same power, all that stuff. So where I'm getting is for the next 10 years, absolutely. Take more Typhoons, take more Growler. But in 15 years, I think we're going to start seeing a change. Growler is a good choice. Link 16 is awesome. Fusion is awesome. For the next 10 to 15 years, yes, Typhoon and Rafale they're gonna be perfect. After that, we'll see.
Roger, very considered answer. Very good. Okay, next we move on to medium-range IR guided missiles. So, the ADA is currently the only major NATO air force that operates an IR guided medium-range air-to-air missile, i.e. the Mika IR, while all others, including the Russian Air Force, have moved away from long-range IR guidance and rely on active radar homing. Why do you think that the French-built combat aircraft still use IR missiles outside of the short-range, sidewinders, magics, whatever. Is this just a coincidence of the Mika being used for both medium and short-range missiles, as the Magic 2 was never officially replaced? Any thoughts on that?
Very good question. I'll ask with a different question. How can you target at more than, let's say, I'll give random numbers, okay? How can we target at more than 15 and then beyond 10 miles? How could you shoot a stealth aircraft?
Not with a radar-guided missile.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting.
What about an IR missile?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm aware, the 5th gens will have a slightly lower heat signature, but it will still have a heat signature.
It will. Mm-hmm. What if the guy cracks a burner?
Then it will have a whopping great heat signature, and you can bang him down with a medium-range IR.
And you can detect him at dozens and dozens are miles away,
yeah.
and you know he steers. That's why we have IRST and all those systems.
Mm-hmm.
So medium-range infrared missiles enable you to target stealth aircraft. And I don't have numbers, honestly. We didn't conduct tests on that, but I'm pretty sure you have a better kill ratio if you use IR against stealth aircraft than if you use Fox 3 regular missiles. Why? Because we all know for a fact, and nobody talks about that matter. Everybody says, oh, great, you can detect a stealth aircraft with L-band radars, and the Russian might be putting L-band radars on their aircraft. Awesome. So Fox 1, okay, but Fox 3, your missile, in the end, is going to have to open his own radar, and it's a X-ray band radar, and the stealth aircraft is designed to counter X-ray band radar. So maybe even if your onboard radar sees it, then your missile is not going to be able to see its target, and you're going to be trash. What if now you shoot a Fox 2 missile? And nowadays, Fox 2 missiles are very, very sensitive. And just look at the Python 5. They're not even only IR, they're also electro-optic for some. And now it opens a new range that enables you maybe to chase its stealthy aircraft on their heat signature.
Roger. So retaining the Mika IRs is future-proofing you against whatever, Su-57, whatever. And
I'll go even further. You're flying your Sukhoi 35, okay? Mm. You're flying around, and you detect that there is a demo. There is a Hawkeye maybe 100 miles away. And you're flying Block 4, and now there is a Rafale radar off using Link 16 from the E2, let's say E2D, very precise Link 16, that is skimming the surface of the water at 100 feet. You don't detect him because of the delta and the way he approached. And now he's targeting you with the L16 data, and he's shooting a Fox 3 missiles. When the Fox 3 missile is going to open his auto-director, you're going to have an alarm. Your system is going to detect that, hey, you're being watched by radar. Now, if the Rafale shoots a Mika IR, you're not going to know, and you're going to be shut down without even knowing you've been attacked.
Yeah.
So IR is really, it's passive in a way you don't know it's coming. That's why it's awesome, because it's gonna, with the Link 16 and all those stuff, it enables you to shoot at somebody and he doesn't know you targeted him. That's how it's so cool. Happened to me at the end of my career, like you're dogfighting with someone, and then there's another aircraft showing up, and he's like 15, 20 miles inbound, and you're in contact with the radar, or you see it on the L16, and you know this guy is trying to come in to assist his buddy. You're fighting with a guy, you stop your turn for just 2 seconds, put your wings level, you shoot a Fox 2 toward that guy, and you continue on. And what happens? The guy don't know he was targeted. He's coming as a reinforcement, and at the debrief, oh, by the way, you got shut down. And he sees that he's coming, and he's like right on your missile, and he never knew the missile was coming. So having those Fox 2 passive missiles, infrared stuff, enables you when you're when you're like on top of your tactical stuff to really surprise the enemy. And I think that's what's so unique with this Mika, and that's why most countries should get that type of stuff, I think, because it's just awesome.
Excellent answer. You are so amazing at explaining things. It's really good. I know it's your job, but right. Let's go back in time from futuristic IR and Link 16. Well, not futuristic, but modern. How difficult was it to learn the Super Attendard or modernized Attendard personally? How did you organize your way to learn it as to fly, bombing and missile firing and landing on a carrier? So I guess he wants this compared to the Rafale. I'm not sure how you want to interpret that.
Sure. So what you have to bear in mind is that when I got transitioned to the Rafale, I had 4.5 years on the Super E, landings at day and night, and 800 hours in the Super E. And I was an instructor on the Super E. So I wasn't showing up as a newbie yet. My first takeoff, single seat, never flew a two-seater, even was instructor, single seat for first flight. I was like holding back to the stick, yelling in my cockpit. So I was discovering afterwards. I'm very expressive in my jet. If you look at my first cat shot, I got a video of it. I yell like if I was at my Sweet 16 party, something like that. But anyway, so I was showing up in the jet with already quite a lot of experience and almost a decade in aviation. So it's make it difficult to compare. A lot of difficulty because you had to learn the aircraft, and at the same time I was managing the operations. Was an ops officer, but I was in charge of all the schedule, was scheduling officer, so I had a lot of workload, and I had to play between learning the system, doing my management work, and on the other side doing all the new tactics, because air-to-air was a new world, or PVR was a new world, and you really have to work on those, and you have to learn very fast. For your reputation, and because you have to you have to really move on pretty fast. So I think Super Attendard was difficult in a way. It was so old school, and the training was so old school, and the mindset was super old school, like showing up at 7:30 in the morning for 11 p.m. takeoff. That was the Super E world. So on Wednesday, you're just like, you're a bit fatigued. So that was very difficult. On the Rafale world, what is difficult is understanding that you're a human and you won't be able to even read the 60,000 pages of the flight manual. The flight manual is in 60,000 pages, but there is just so many information. It's like an Airbus. All those technological driven aircraft, there is so much to know. It is extremely difficult to understand what you should really know. And take it. I ended up being subject matter expert on the Rafale Navy and giving keynotes to Dassault, stuff like that. And I never read the entire paperwork around the Rafale. Just you can't. You have to understand that there are some stuff that you need to know cold, and some stuff you don't even try to remember. You have to know how to get the information very fast, but you shouldn't try to know everything, which is a big difference with the Super E. So I think it's a change in mentality and understanding you can't understand everything. I never understood how my flight control works, honestly, and they don't even try to explain to you. So it's like, okay, just it's going to work. If it doesn't work, apply the procedure, but don't try to understand what it's doing, because nobody really can explain it to you, nor it is your job to understand. So a bit like Boeing. Boeing is a bit like this. Just stick to what you're supposed to know and do what you're supposed to do well. So I think the difference was changing the mindset, because it's really a big change. Super E, you could understand everything. It's simple. Rafale, you can't.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. Right, we're getting back into dogfights, which we all like. Assuming that you trained against the US Navy / USAF, how did the Rafale perform against legacy Generation 4 American fighters like F-15, 16, 18, and how did the Americans view the 3 European Delta Canard fighters in general?
I'm going to go with a traditional cocky answer. They view it from the front, because they were like this the entire time.
Zing!
But joke aside, F-16 is nice, very nice. I really like the F-16. It's small, difficult to see, very agile in combat. Never dogfighted an F-15. F-18, we crushed the Marines off the coast of Brittany. That's how I got my some of my tests to be the flight lead on Rafale, I had to fly against the British Typhoons and against the F-18s, U.S. Marine. So I remember those flights quite a lot, and very good souvenirs. But F-18 can really take a lot of AOA, which is very dangerous. But what you have to understand is that all our training scenarios and situations are biased because we're cuffed. Let's say we're going to fly against an F-18. They're going to say, we're not using our 9X. And you're like, okay. Because the 9X is such a game changer, they just look at you and you're dead. So all the training we do, to be honest, is not that realistic because everybody's getting some cuff. Or you say, oh, I'm Blue Force, I'm doing 100% of what I can do. You're Red Force, you're like simulating your MiG-29 with AA-10 Alpha when there could be shooting AMRAAM. So sometimes we do blue against blue, but usually we always have a very specific scenario or situation we want to train on. And when we fight against the US, it is rare to do blue against blue because they don't really want to show their tactics. If something that bothered me a lot was I never heard about toy decoy during my military career. Being Typhoon or F-18s, never heard the word in the brief, never heard the use in the debrief. And when I was tactical officer, I digged a lot into the ANALE 55, and they have a lot of them, and you never hear about them. But they're a huge game changer because basically, from my understanding, they could just go straight in on the first merge initially, and your first shot should destroy their decoy and not themselves, which changes the entire geometry that we do. So what I want to emphasize is that between what we do in inter-ally operation and what would be the real life, I honestly think there is a big difference.
Roger. Yeah, very interesting. And I won't go into it because I'm just not qualified or experienced in any way. I do remember kind of not analysing, but looking at a F-22 versus Rafale dogfight, where when the Rafale wins, and I'm sure, you know, that will fine. But my comment was just be a little bit careful before putting big comments all over the internet saying the Rafale is better than the F-22. Be a bit careful because they're not actually fighting fair. You know, maybe the Rafale has to stick to a speed. Maybe the Raptor has to turn it this on or that off. Just, you know, be a bit sensible.
I actually reviewed that footage on my channel. I think I spent like 40 minutes or 2 times 40 minutes discussing it, something like that. And now, looks like actually the F-22 pilot on the side is making huge rookie mistakes, like reversing turn just doesn't make sense. What you have to bear in mind is that the MiG-21 can shoot down an F-22. An F-22 can shoot down a Rafale. A Rafale can shoot down a Dassault Falcon with IR missile could shoot down a F-35 doing a VAD. It is extremely complex, and the situation is usually what's going to dictate the outcome. But that's something to keep in mind. You can just compare platform. It doesn't work that way, indeed. I won't be able to stay much longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm afraid I got a small family stuff to.
Give me how many minutes? How many minutes that day, just so I can plan? How many minutes?
Pretty short.
Pretty short.
Because she's complaining.
Right. Okay, we're just going to run this one then, because I've seen exactly what we were talking about there. We've seen a recent video of a Rafale engaging an F-22 in a dogfight and even gunning the Raptor. What?
It's not a valid gun. It is not a valid gun. I talk about it on my video. The F-22 is not killed by the Rafale in that video. That is footage from 2006, I think, DLC stuff. So be careful with that, because the pilot mixed up his switches and had shot opportunities he didn't take, so he can claim the kills. That is important.
I missed that, but I'm an idiot. A second part of the question is, what makes, I can't really understand this, but when makes this possible? Basically saying, how can a traditional aircraft beat a...
Pilot mistake.
Yeah.
Whatever your aircraft, if I'm maneuvering against you and he's, like he reversed his turn, the F-22, by reversing his turn, just offered his 6 o'clock and is getting punished right away. Never, ever reverse a turn if there isn't a nice speed overshoot from the enemy. just don't reverse your turn for no reason. And he reversed his turn not once, but I think twice, which doesn't make sense at all.
Okay,
I
right.
think he lost sight, to be honest. I think he lost sight of
Roger.
Rafale. But hey, you can lose sight, so you get killed. Makes sense as well.
Roger, yeah. And I guess someone leaked the footage out to piss him off. I don't know.
Yeah, long story.
Yeah. Roger, Ate, absolutely wonderful having you on. You've done all the work for me. I haven't had to push you. You've just, done it. It's really, really nice. Obviously, thank you for coming on. Sorry for the guys that we couldn't get onto your questions, but, this is real life. This is how it is. I would love to one day maybe have you back for something, a flight or a fight or whatever, because you're just such a cool guy and it just makes it all worth doing. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
Fly safe. Oh, hold on. Hey, I'm going to do my Canadian.
He's off.
If you're looking for something to read,
debrief
about debriefing. Debrief is key.
Good. Brilliant, Ate. Thank you very much. Really nice guy, and I'll see you later, Ate.
Play safe.
Cheers. Bye.